Welcome to the Boxing Source Midweek Report, where we tackle the latest topics in the sport of boxing here up to this point every single Wednesday. Time to start the show. Yo, what's up? Mic check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What's happening, everybody? What's good? What's going on with y'all? We should be here popping it up, chopping it up and everything. What the heck is going on here? I don't know. It is what it is, right? We are here live with the midweek report. And we got a few things here that we're going to be talking about in this edition of the midweek report here for February 11th, 2026. We've kind of had a few things that have been going on within the boxing circles. And some, we kind of have been talking about over the past week or so. Yeah, we do have some things that are on the schedule and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But we're going to be talking about that here a little bit later as, we got, of course, fights that's happening on Sunday that we're going to be talking about. We're going to bring up possibly, time permitting, we'll talk about fights that are taking place on next Saturday, right? So we will, kind of like get into that here in this edition of the midweek report. But we also, wanted to tackle a couple of things here, right? When it comes to some of the top, stories comes to that, right? So, what we're gonna do here is we're gonna tackle the whole thing when it comes to what's happening with the WBC, right? Because there's been a story over the past couple of weeks or so, especially given what took place on January 31st. Now, it seems like, folks are still going over what, the WBC had stated in reference to Shakur Stevenson and his status as the WBC lightweight champion. But, the thing about it is that, we kind of like talked about this, right? We talked about this, earlier last week, I would say. I know that people are kind of like, referencing what happened here yesterday, but this kind of like was brought up last week, as I talked with the WBC president, Mauricio Sulaiman. So, I'm going to be able to queue up that particular portion here and then kind of go into more about, what had been said recently and kind of like bring up a couple of things when it comes to the World Boxing Council, particularly with what Mauricio Sulaiman said. So that's what we're going to tackle first here in this one, right? So what we got here is we're going to cue this up. We got, of course, WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman, and he talks about the whole thing that went down when it comes to the WBC lightweight division and Shakur Stevenson challenging for the WBO and Ring Magazine titles at super lightweight. So we're gonna cue this up. It should be on the screen. Should be able to see it, everything like that. Once I put this up, yep, here we go. So we got that, and we're gonna just go over that particular topic here real quick. Now, remember, this was from last week. All right, so let's run it. Time the WBC lightweight champion Shakur Stevenson facing Teofimo Lopez, where that was for the WBO and lineal title at 140 pounds. He was able to win that particular bout. And after that, there's been like some discussion on what would happen afterwards if he would keep the belt or not. As of right now, you have that particular title vacant within the lightweight division. Can you expound on that situation?
Yes, Shakur Stevenson has been closely associated with the WBC since 2019, and he's a pride of boxing. Had a tremendous victory against Teofimo Lopez this past Saturday night. Now he's in super lightweight. Wish him the best of luck, great success, and perhaps the paths with the WBC will cross in the near future. In the meantime, we wish him great success in super lightweight. And the lightweight championship was declared vacant. And now we're going to address on what is the next steps in the lightweight division.
Gotcha. As you said, he had been the champion there in the lightweight division, has held the WBC championship in the super featherweight division as well. But with these current circumstances, that are happening with that you were able to go on and move forward with that. I know that Shakur Stevenson has had some comments in reference to it. But we don't necessarily have to visit. We don't have to there on that front. So we'll be able to move forward on that. And now, that was the thing there as far as like what the WBC president Mauricio Sulaiman said, and this was last week. Okay. Now, thing about it is that he's talking about a couple of things that did come up in reference to the World Boxing Council and with Shakur Stevenson. Now, this thing was actually a topic that actually wasn't even like raised up this week or last week. It was actually brought up the week before. Okay. Now the thing is, I'm trying to see about pulling up this thing here. So we got this. I wanted to try to get something on here, but it looked like they tried to modify a few things here. So I wanted to kind of like get something here in reference to that when it comes to the World Boxing Council, because I wanted to pull up a page from the WBC, right? And it looks like I don't know. It looks like they're trying to do some updates or something, because I wanted to pull up a couple of things here when it comes to their joints, right? So all right, so this is what I'm going to do, right? I am going to kind of like pull up the thing there for their rules and regulations, right? I'm going to see here if I could, get that sorted, and then I wanted to get the thing there in reference to their mandatory, right? So as you've seen there with Mauricio Sulaiman, he was talking about the whole situation with Shakur Stevenson, right? Now let's see here. Now shout out to my guy Thomas Hill in the building. What's happening with you? What's good, right? Now I'm trying to see here if I could pull up this thing here with the rules and regulations, because I want y'all to kind of like see what he's basically referencing, and why there's been a number of people that have kind of like raised a little bit of a problem of sorts when it comes to their rules, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share this whole thing with the WBC rules and regulations, right? It should be here, should be showing on the screen here. And at the bottom of the page there, it shows the thing there for Article 7, financial obligations of promoters and boxers, right? This is page 41 of the WBC rules and regulations. Now, you got the whole thing there about sanctioning fees, boxing bout fees, and all that type of stuff, right? Now, if you go into this whole thing, right, with the what is it, 7.2 or whatever it is, right? It should be something else here, right? All right, here it is. So you got Article 7, 7.3 B. I'm gonna see here if I could enlarge this here real quick. Now, some people have shown screenshots of this, but I'm going to show you like where it is on the actual rules and regulations. So in 7.3b, right, it says, well, any boxer participation in any WBC bout is hereby obligated as follows. You go to B, it says, in the event that a WBC champion competes in any bout which his WBC title is not at stake, the champion is obligated to pay the WBC 50% of the WBC sanctioning fee, payable as if the bout were a title defense, in view of the market value brought to the bout as a result of his standing attained as a WBC champion. Okay. Now, this is what has got people, all in a tizzy, right? Now, I'm going to be as straightforward as I can with this, right? So The thing is, you were able to build your way up to becoming a WBC champion, no matter what the division is. Okay. Then your obligation is, as a WBC champion, to fight guys that are within the WBC rankings within your respective division. Okay. So you can have a fight against anyone that's ranked within the top 15. They're saying, hey, that's cool. If you want to go up in weight, or if you want to go down in weight and challenge the WBC champion in that division, they're cool with that. Now, if you were going to go up or down the division and you challenge a world champion that's from another sanctioning body, what they're saying is, hey, if you're going to face someone that's not the WBC champion in that division, then you're going to pay this as a sanctioning fee instead of a sanctioning fee as a WBC champion. Okay. So, for example, all y'all know about the whole thing with sanctioning fees in general, right? Okay. 3%, 4%, whatever it is, WBC, IBF, whatever. All right. So if you're defending the WBC title, you're paying that 3%. Okay. But if you're going up against another world champion that's not in your division, they're basically saying you pay not 3%, but you're going to be paying 1.5% of your purse. Okay. So you're like, okay, why is that an issue? Well, the thing about it is that what the WBC is saying is that because you are the WBC champion, that is adding some value to you as a fighter going into these fights. So regardless if you're defending the WBC belt or not, your value goes up because you're the WBC champion. Okay. So what they're saying here in this particular example with Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez is like, yeah, okay, you could go up and you could face Teofimo Lopez for the WBO and Ring Magazine title. Yeah, that's cool. But you would have to pay 1.5% of your purse instead of 3% because you're not defending the WBC title. Okay. So they ain't saying like, hey, you got to pay the full purse. Nah, they ain't necessarily saying that. What they're saying is, hey, just, pay this amount of money here and, it'll be cool. Now, given the whole situation as far as like how much money was behind that particular fight, yeah, it does sound like a lot because, hey, 100 grand when they're basically getting paid what 10 million, 9 million and 10 million, right? Then yeah, it's gonna seem like it's a lot. But at the same token, right? It's that particular amount because they're just saying it's 1.5% of whatever he's getting paid for that particular event, right? Like, I'll put it this way. What if it was Shakur Stevenson defended the WBC lightweight title against, well, he already had the bout against William Cepeda. Then let's see, who else would be out there? What was it? Yadier Herrera, right? So if he was facing Yadier Herrera, he would be paying 3% of those sanctioning fees because he would be defending that title. But because it's Stevenson versus Yadier Herrera, yeah, you might not get a person as large as a Stevenson versus a Teofimo Lopez. Probably not even close. Even with what Stevenson kind of like gets paid as a minimum, you wouldn't be able to get that, thing as far as like the percentage goes. But in comparison to facing a Teofimo Lopez, where you're getting like a purse of $9 million, $10 million, then yeah, it's going to be more with that particular fee, even though it's just 1.5%. Okay. So that's the whole thing that, the WBC is kind of like saying in reference to Shakur Stevenson, right? Now, what I wanted to do was I wanted to pull up the page there when it came to the WBC and the mandatory status because they had it on the page, man. I saw it, there for the Board of Governors, and they had particularly like updated it. But now I don't see it updated. That's what I'm trying to figure out because they had it updated as of January 27th, right? And when they had it there for January 27th, they put in like the updated status as far as like the fighters and everything like that. So let me see here. Hopefully I get it. All right, I got it. Bet. So I know y'all are able to see the thing here with the whole rules and everything like that. Right now, I'm gonna try to switch over to the thing there for the official mandatory status. Right, so it should be switched, and you see the page there. Right, so this is on the WBC website. Mandatory status is ruled by the WBC Board of Governors in the convention that is updated as of January 27, 2026. Remember that date. All right. So you see there, like originally December 3rd, because that's when they had the convention. They had the whole thing referencing mandatory status for every single champion and anything with eliminated bouts, mandatories, all that, right? Now we scroll down to lightweight, right? It says there, champion Shakur Stevenson petitions to fight Teofimo Lopez over the weight under the WBC rules and keeping the 130-pound title is granted. Now, when that was made in the convention that took place in December, right? Now, the thing about it is that with them saying it, they're saying, hey, you're able to have this defense or, go after Teofimo Lopez, right? Because, they put in the request, everything like that. And the WBC is just saying, hey, all right, you're able to do that. But again, we have the rules that are in place. That was by the Board of Governors that took place. That was approved back in 2024. So when you're getting closer and closer to the event there in January 31st, you already know what the rule is in place for you to actually have this particular fight against Teofimo Lopez and not have the WBC lightweight title on the line. And the WBC super lightweight title is not on the line. So they're like, okay, yeah, you could do that, but be mindful of the rule that we have in place, right? So you go into the whole thing with what's going on fight week, okay? Getting ready for the bout, all good, all cool. Everybody's there because it's like a ring event. You have the ring awards, every sanctioned body's there, all of the fighters there, everything like that. But you still have what's going on with the WBC. So while the days were getting closer and closer and closer to the fight, the WBC is like contacting the promoter, the manager, the fighter, and saying, hey, this rule is in place, right? This rule is in place, right? So you want to go ahead and have this fight? Hey, we're like saying, hey, no problem. But this rule is in place, right? And according to, Mauricio Sulaiman, they're saying, hey, they didn't get back to him, right? So you see there, it says, there is no response from Shakur Stevenson to multiple communications with which the WBC board will address. Remember, that is from January 27th. So that was like a couple of days into fight week against Teofimo Lopez for Shakur Stevenson, right? So the thing about it is, it's like they're saying, hey, you know about the fee, right? You know about the fee, right? Hey, you know about the fee, right? Go ahead with the fight. Hey, you still know about the fee, right? We ain't getting any response. We ain't getting this money because you representing the WBC as lightweight champion, you still have to adhere to the rules, and you're not going ahead and following the rules, so we just have to go ahead and strip you. So that's basically what they're saying, is that, hey, you're going to go after this fighter and he's not a WBC champion. We had this fee here, 1.5%. You're not, you're not going to be paying at 1.5%. Okay, then we'll strip you. It's no different than if someone had a title and they didn't pay a 3%. Like, for example, you could go back to the whole thing with Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, right? Floyd Mayweather beat Manny Pacquiao. He had 2 titles going into that fight. Manny Pacquiao had the WBO title. Floyd Mayweather wins. Does he pay the WBO? Nope. So the WBO strips him. This is no different. You could go up there, you could win that belt from Teofimo Lopez, but if you don't pay that sanctioning fee that we pretty much put in place and that you should be aware of, you should be mindful of, or your party is mindful of, you don't pay it, cool. Then we got to strip you. I mean, it is what it is. Now, we did see that Mauricio Sulaiman was on, with what was it, Boxing Scene or whatever it is, and he pretty much like explained the same situation there. He didn't actually point to this particular rule that I posted earlier in reference to what's on the WBC rules and regulations, right? But he did also state that you would have another example of this that's coming up soon. What did he mean by that? He said when he was talking about the WBC light heavyweight champion in David Benavidez, right? David Benavidez is going to be scheduled to fight Zurdo Ramirez in the cruiserweight division. Is Zurdo Ramirez a WBC champion in the cruiserweight division? No. But what he's saying is, hey, you could go ahead and you could face Zurdo Ramirez, but you still have this, in place, right? So you could pretty much see that. Like it shows, hey, I got it still up here. Champion David Benavidez petitioned to fight a cruiserweight fight under WBC rules, right? But if he's going after Zurdo, then Zurdo holding those titles is like, yeah, he's not a WBC champ. So whatever you're gonna get paid for this fight, we get 1.5%. So if David Benavidez doesn't pay off that 1.5%, then he would be stripped of the WBC light heavyweight title. If not, then hey, Shakur Stevenson would have a case on what's going on right now. But that is what they're kind of like talking about right here, right? Now, the thing about it is like another thing that was said by Mauricio Sulaiman here this week was that, hey, they're just doing things like other sanctioning bodies are doing, right? So my thing is, it's like, okay, is that pretty much the case? I don't know. I don't know because I haven't seen anything. Well, at least like for example with the WBO that says that hey, you got to pay a certain amount, a certain amount of money if you're going to be fighting for another world title in a higher division. I haven't seen that from the WBO yet. Haven't necessarily seen it from the IBF yet or the WBA. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, yo, what is going on to the to this joint where you got people like I guess they're roasting the WBC right now. But all I got to do is just say, hey, this is right here. This is what we got in the rules. It's put in place. It's been put in place since December of 2024. So if they're like, hey, if they don't want to go ahead and pay the fee, cool. That's on them. Maybe at a different, juncture, you could revisit, what's going on. I know that, they had the whole thing with it being Shakur Stevenson and given what happened, a few months ago with Terrence Crawford in the WBC, that was a real wild situation. But this thing right here is kind of different because, again, you're going up in weight and you're not fighting for the sanctioning body's title within that weight class, then they say, hey, you're going to have to at least pay something in order for you to have that status or that name of being a WBC champion. So that's kind of like how they do it. The thing about it is, it's like with it being the WBC and their whole little background and all that type of stuff, that hey, you make that status, or you make that statement, then yeah, people are gonna have a whole lot to say about it. You know what I mean? Now, like I said, other people they might have some type of favoritism. We see it happen over the years. We see it going down over the years. But this particular case, as I was mentioning there, y'all go up to, like I said, the WBC rules and regulations. They show like where it is in place where they say, hey, if you're fighting for a world title in another sanctioning body in a higher division, you don't pay 3%, you pay 1.5%. That's what it is, you know. So that's kind of like the whole joint. I mean, hey, if y'all disagree with that, like I said, y'all continue to roast the WBC. Y'all continue to roast Mauricio Sulaiman. As y'all know, with getting the interview with him last week, I still would have contact with the World Boxing Council. I'm waiting on one other thing with them when it comes to the middleweight situation, because remember, we're supposed to have the middleweight championship fight on January 31st, but it didn't happen. So I wanted to see what was going on with that and Carlos Adames there, because he was, out of that January 31st card. So there's that, right? So that was mainly what I had for that particular topic. All right. Other things that I wanted to try to go over or go through was, we do have, of course, what's coming up this weekend. Wanted to kind of like pull that up here real quick too, because we do have a thing there with Zuffa Boxing, right? So we got Zuffa Boxing that is scheduled here for this Sunday. We got prelims. We got about 5 fights. Could be up to 5 fights. We got Daryl Kuzminov versus the dreaded to be determined there. So we got to see what's going on with that. We got a few. There's supposed to be 2 lightweight fights. We'll see if that goes down. We got 2 middleweight fights there in the prelims, and then in the main card there, you're gonna have at the main event, the heavyweight division, Efe Ajagba versus Charles Martin. Now, this one right here, this is going to be a really interesting bout here in the heavyweight division. You know what I mean? Shout out to Mar the Prince. He says, "Did you see that Jihad withdrew from the Winley Hernandez fight?" I think I did see that. We had something. There's the kind of boxing kind of like made a comment that she had a conversation with Wenley Hernandez, in that they say that Jihad Tucker requested for a high amount of money for that fight to take place. That's that's wild. Of course, someone had asked me about that potential fight, a few days ago, and I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if that's a good move." At least for me, I didn't think that would be a good move for Jihad Tucker right now. You got, of course, Winley Hernandez is there, at the top of the rankings for the WBA, and we ain't. I don't know if we're gonna be seeing like Winley Hernandez going up against the American Dream, Erislandy Lara, right? So now it's almost like a waiting game for Wenley Hernandez. He's had a couple of fights. Well, it was like 2 fights last year. I was at the one where he fought on February 1st. Then he had the joint there with that was back in Vegas again. In like July, and he like and then he had another one in Hollywood, Florida in October. So Wenley Hernandez had about like 3 fights last year, and he could have been back in the mix here against the Jihad Tucker. But I was like, I ain't think that would be a good matchup. Now, I don't even know if they could do it though. What if you would have had Wenley Hernandez versus Carlos Adames? But I don't think they're gonna do that, because Carlos Adames is still supposed to, have his mandatory, shot. He was granted a voluntary defense against Mo Williams that was supposed to be January 31st, but then we got sick. So now it's like, okay, I'm waiting on, what's up, what's the response to that. You know what I mean? So we gotta see how that goes. But yeah, with that being, with that going down, I don't know. Maybe they could redo it. They do need to fill out that card, or at least what is it? TGB Promotions has to fill out that card for March 28th. That's coming up. So I mean, you got of course the thing there with Fedor versus Thurman, but we got to see what else they're gonna have for that card. Shout out to Bull Rider here in the building, from Houston, Texas, in there, whatever it is, man. It said, Adames, Lara, and Hernandez don't seem too keen on fighting each other. Yeah, that's like a real wild situation, man. They now, and the whole thing too, of course, with what could have happened last December, we should have had a unification bout in December 6th. We were supposed to get Arislandi Lara versus Janabek, but Janabek, like I said, screwed that up. So now I got to see like how that whole situation is, man. Do we got the? Yeah, I should have this drink, right? They still, hey, the IBF though, the IBF still has Zanabek as their world champion though. So maybe that whole situation, as far as like the testing, maybe the B sample came out negative or something. I don't know. But the IBF still currently has Zanabek as their world champion there at 160. But yeah, the other, those other fighters there at 160, they ain't really like in a real push to fight each other on that front. So I had to see how that's going to sort itself out, especially with the 160 division. That's been like a real bad look. You know what I mean? All right, back to the joint here with Zuffa Boxing real quick. Efe Ajagba versus Charles Martin. Of course, Charles Martin, who walks the earth like a god, former IBF heavyweight champion. Kind of like it, been in and out of the whole joint with the heavyweight division and stuff like that here over the past few years. He did have like a fight against Jared Anderson a couple of years back. And then had like one bout after that in 2024. And this is his first fight, since then. And then you got Efe Ajagba there, of course, who, had the bouts against Guido Vianello. Frank Sanchez was his lone loss. Had the bout against Mark McCauley in Riyadh last May that, he should have won that. But I mean, it was like, I don't know, man. It almost seemed like nobody won that fight. Like, come on, man. That was wild. But now we get to see, both these guys in the mix here at the main event on this Zuffa Boxing card. That's going to be on Paramount Plus. You do also have, Umar Zambekov. Yeah, I butchered that name big time, right? Going up against Ahmed El Bialy, who, man, his lone loss was to John Pascal in 2017. Like, that's why I was like, El Bialy, that name sounds a little bit familiar, but back in 2017, like, man, that's something. Like, he has been active, at least like fighting once a year from 2021 until now. They're in competing within that light heavyweight division or whatever it is. So, I mean, you probably got a good couple of scraps that could happen in this Zuffa Boxing card, but I say it's pretty much all about the main event there with the Ajagba versus Charles Martin. All right, that's what I got. There on that front. So that's what to look forward to. On there. Like I said, you got the prelims at 6:00 Eastern time, and then the main card there around 9:00. All right. Now, I did kind of like wanted to, bring up the whole joint there with a recent announcement that was made there for Zuffa Boxing, because you got the main event for March 8th that's set. You got Jai Opetaia versus Brandon Glanton. And it's going to be for what they said the inaugural Zuffa Boxing Championship there within that particular division. Of course, that's interesting because you had Jai Opetaia, that number one was signed to Zuffa Boxing, and then number two, he is the IBF cruiserweight champion. Yep, and he is, still there as the IBF Cruiserweight champion. Even though they recently released their rankings. I kind of like shared. I think I shared it a little bit there earlier, but you kind of like see, there on the screen that you got Jai Opetaia, their Cruiserweight champion. You know what I'm saying? And you got Brandon Glanton there over at ranked at number 15. So here's going to be my thing, right? Remember the stuff that we was talking about earlier with the WBC and Shakur Stevenson. And I mentioned it there when they said that the WBC is gonna bring it up with David Benavidez when he faces Zordo Ramirez in May. Now the question for the IBF is: will the IBF charge Jai Opetaia a sanctioning fee to fight Brandon Glanton on Zuffa Boxing while not defending the IBF cruiserweight title and then getting a Zuffa Boxing title? That I want to know. And the thing is, I haven't spoken to like anybody representing the IBF ever since I've kind of like covered the sport. I've talked with guys within the WBA, the WBC, of course, the WBO. There with Gustavo Olivieri as the president of the WBO, but nobody in the IBF. So I want to know from the IBF are they going to be charging Jai Opetaia sanctioning fees to fight on Zuffa Boxing on March 8th against Brandon Glanton? That's gonna be funny if they're gonna end up doing that. You feel me? Because then I'll be like, hey, Jai, you done signed up to Zuffa Boxing. You get paid whatever you get paid by Zuffa Boxing, but you fight and you win this bout against Brandon Glanton. Yeah, you're gonna hold that Zuffa Boxing title, but are you still gonna be holding the IBF title there at the same time? Let me see how that works. Let me see how that works. All right. So that's gonna be something there to kind of like look at, or something to look for here within these next few weeks. You know what I mean? So you do have that's kind of like on the schedule there, scheduled for March 8th for Zuffa Boxing. Jai Opetaia versus Brandon Glanton that's supposed to be headlining that particular card. So we have to see how that goes on that. Now, of course, we got February 21st. You do have the fight there in Las Vegas. That card in Las Vegas, of course, headlined by Mario Barrios versus Ryan Garcia. You do have two real key bouts there within the 140-pound division, as the IBF championship will be on the line and the WBA championship will be on the line. You got Richard Hitchens going up against Oscar Duarte. You got Gary Antoine Russell going up against Andy Hirioka. And hopefully, it's going to be an outside chance, but hopefully I could catch up with Antoine before he goes out there to Las Vegas. So it might be tomorrow or Friday or something like that. I might be able to see about catching up with them there before he goes out to Vegas for that particular fight week and fight card, right? You got the whole thing there with Richard Hitchens. There you also got Frank Martin going up against Nahir Albright. That's going to be another interesting bout. That's going to be taking place there. So that's one thing to kind of like look forward to. So we got like at least like three fights there within the super lightweight division. And the thing with Frank Martin is he has his bout against Nahir Albright. He could, position himself for a fight against one of those champions. Now, the thing is, though, Gary Antoine Russell against Andy Hirioka is a mandatory defense. So, winner of that has the option to face anybody and get a unification if he wants to, or go after that. Who's the favorite on Barrios versus Garcia? All right, good question. Let's see if we could hit up the boxing odds there for that. I think it is Ryan Garcia. Yep, it's Ryan Garcia there. So you kind of like go into this year with the boxing odds. You see Mario Barrios there at, what is it, plus 180 or plus 188. You got Ryan Garcia at like minus 240. You got BetMGM, they're saying minus 225, and it's saying like FanDuel at minus 260 for Ryan Garcia. So all of those, bet lines, they got Ryan Garcia there at, probably around 2.5 to 1 favorite over Mario Barrios. Man, if I would have, if I catch up with a couple of folks here, like I said it from what I heard from like last week, it's saying like some people are kind of like switching from Mario Barrios to Ryan Garcia. Now, I'm hoping, what I've heard isn't the case, but it's saying like the move for Mario Barrios to be over there with Joe Goosen may not be what people think it is. Okay. But we'll see, because this is a very intriguing bout. There, of course, within the welterweight division, and a lot, on the line within that particular bout in itself. People are talking about, hey, with Mario Barrios, him being the WBC champion, that the plan is, yeah, I put it in quotes, to try to get that belt off of Mario Barrios. That's why some people are kind of like theorize why he was able to face Manny Pacquiao last year. Thought it would be Manny Pacquiao that could do it. Now they have Ryan Garcia. So you kind of like see the pattern here is not necessarily guys that, as some would say, may have went up the ranks in the WBC, but have that name and notoriety. It says if they hold the world championship there, then with them holding the world title, it'll hold a whole lot more weight, so to speak, than if Mario Barrios held the world title. So now it's basically with Mario Barrios just proving himself fight after fight after fight. But the thing about it is that in his previous 2 fights, he's ended up with draw. Draw against Manny Pacquiao, draw against Abel Ramos. Speaking of Abel Ramos, he's going to be on that February 28th card there for, Arizona, for Sugar Nunez versus Emmanuel Navarrete. So that's going to be on that matchroom card there. So you're going to see Abel Ramos in action in there. But for Mario Barrios, him having, 2 results of a draw, his coach at the time there, of course, Bob Santos, said, hey, listen, it's like a results-driven business. He said, hey, I had him for the past couple of fights, thought we would be able to do something. He had the draw against Abel Ramos, had the draw against, Manny Pacquiao. So he said, hey, listen, let's see if we can just try this. Let's have you work with, Joe Goosen, of course, Hall of Fame trainer. But we're going to see here by next Saturday what the results are for all of that. So we'll see how it goes. But we know that Ryan is going to be Ryan regardless. He's not a guy that, has something where you're going to see him pretty much like outclass a fighter. He'll overwhelm him with speed and, quick twitch and that type of stuff. But as far as like completely overwhelming someone like that, you don't necessarily see that there from Ryan Garcia. But despite that, you see a number of these people kind of like putting a lot of money behind Ryan Garcia for that particular fight. So, that's something right there, man. What else we got there on the odds, though? I wanted to see that there real quick. Because you're also going to have Beck the Bully versus Sanag Becko on that fight card. They got Beck at minus 1,100, 11 to 1 favorite over Sanag Becko. For Frank Martin, 3 to 1 favorite over Nahir Albright. You got 5.5 to 1 for Richard Hitchens and 3.5 to 1 for Gary Antoine Russell. Now, y'all see the thing there for February 22nd. Franchon Cruz and Caressa Shields. Those odds is insane. Absolutely insane. And even though it's the second fight, you know what I mean? Uh, hold on. It says you look like Barrios. Step back on Pacquiao. No, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, could you kind of like explain that? Because when I saw the fight, I'm like, yo, come on, Barrios, you gotta do better than that, right? The first couple of rounds, okay. The next like 5, 6, 7 rounds, I'm like, what is Barrios doing? And it took like, Bob Santos to like curse him out or something like that, and to get him to, up his activity, because when Mario Barrios was like actually throwing punches and very active with it, Pacquiao really didn't have an answer, you know. But we'll see, how that is, man, because like I said, I mean, I've heard some stuff like from last week in reference to Barrios being out there with Joe Goosen. Hopefully, it ain't like that. You know what I mean? Shout out Gorgio. He says, worried about Andy Hirioka beating Russell. Hmm. Well, I mean, the odds ain't really like looking like that. My thing would be that someone like Gary Antoine Russell shouldn't be having like one fight in a year. You know, you would have want to have this fight when it was supposed to be on. I mean, we could have had Tank versus Jake Paul, right? He was supposed to be on that card in November, going up against Andy Hirioka. But now it's like you basically having your first fight since March 1st of last year. When you won the WBA title there against Raul Valenzuela. So someone like a Gary Antoine Russell, you would want to see him in the ring like two or three times a year. Having him there for like that one time is that that I don't like that, because timing could be off. You gotta get things that you have to kind of like catch up with and stuff like that. So going up against Andy Hirioka, who is there, of course, like I said, undefeated. They're at around like 6 feet. 6 feet with a reach of like 74. Now, I mean, I'm gonna get into the whole joint here next week as far as like the fights that are taking place there for Las Vegas on February 21st. But yeah, that's something that a number of people have said, hey, you can't sleep on Andy Hirioka in this particular bout. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that they're kind of like on their P's and Q's with that. So I'm gonna see what's up. Maybe tomorrow or Friday if I can link up with them, or kind of like schedule something. But I'd like to see. Really interested in that particular fight. Interested in the Hitchens versus Duarte fight too, because Duarte is someone that you can't necessarily sleep on either. You know what I mean? So I gotta see like how that one's gonna shape out there in this fight card. So when you got like a Duarte who's there with 23 knockouts of his 30 wins, and Richard Hitchens that's someone that kind of like tries to outpoint his opponent and things like that. I like to see how Hitchens kind of like adapts to someone like a Oscar Duarte on this joint too. So that's most of the stuff there that you got on that schedule for the 21st, right? So looking forward to that. You do have a number of fights that are going on within this area that I did talk about last week, but there's like one story or one developing story when it comes to one of those cards, because you originally had one fighter that was scheduled to be on for the card in Hanover, Maryland, and now apparently he's not on the card because there's been a little bit of a conflict with his promoter. Now, I'll say this: I've been to a couple of those events by said promoter. Both of those times, I've had an issue or two as far as like credentials and everything like that. There's been multiple stories of other people within the media having issues with said promoter and credentials, things like that. And they have been having some issues with other fighters in the past. So this story here, Mojo, some people ain't surprised about it. And as far as like what's going to be going on February 21st and a number of the fights that are on that card, I mean, it's going to be what it's going to be. But listen, that we all know there in boxing, like stuff like this happens all the time, all the time. And the thing about it is like, especially when you have a fighter that kind of like grows in popularity and gets to a certain point that it might be a little bit over what a promoter could provide for them, then you kind of like run into this kind of issue. So hopefully we'll follow this story. I want to see if I can catch up with them here because hey, they said they ain't gonna be part of the card. So we'll see if they could talk about it on that sense. Now, the one other thing I wanted to talk about here before I close off with the midweek report, we did see some things in what's going on in the 154-pound division. Shout out BVO, man. Hey, I'm gonna see if I could get at you here for something for tomorrow. All right, so we'll see how that works out, right? But yeah, I was talking about the whole thing with the 154-pound division. It seems like we had some motion for one of the world champions to go after another world champion. Okay. You seen that Xander Zayas is kind of like said that hey, that he's pushed for Top Rank to negotiate something, negotiate something with IBF champion Josh Kelly. Yep, we do have Xander Zayas that won the WBA championship from Abbas Barao on January 31st. You got Josh Kelly that won the IBF championship from Bakhmut Murtazaliev on January 31st. To have like another unification in the 154-pound division would be something. Now, we do have that whole situation with Josh Kelly and his little dealing with Matchroom Boxing. Okay. They do have options on Josh Kelly due to winning the bid for that bout between Kelly and Backroom. There's some people that say that, hey, Boots should go ahead and have that fight next with Josh Kelly. I don't know. So we'll see how that goes on that front, because I would really be interested to see if you have this particular bout between Xander Zayas and Josh Kelly on a couple of fronts, because I kind of like talked about this on Sunday. You do have this situation with these promotional companies, and when you don't necessarily have a network deal or a solid network deal, particularly in the US, that kind of like, limits your mobility and your value of some of your fighters. So that's why you kind of like see a number of those fighters within Top Rank on these other cards, whether it's through, Ring, Shayla, Matchroom, or something like that. I kind of like put up the example there for Top Rank, right? Yeah, you could have the whole thing with Keyshawn Davis or something like that, right? But Bruce Carrington, right? But you also had the thing there when who was it? Emmanuel Navarrete going up against Sugar Nunez on February 28th. That's a matchroom card. When you had Rick Moritaia versus Andy Cruz over at the Fountains of Blue in Las Vegas, that was a matchroom card. So now, if you got someone like a Xander Zayas, yeah, he was able to have that fight that he had against Sebastian Barao in Puerto Rico, but that wasn't 100% a top ranked card like that. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that is. You know what I mean? He says that Zayas wants it in Puerto Rico and New York City. Kelly wants it in Sunderland. I'm guessing that would be the issue to make this fight. And that's why I said, like, if Top Rank had a network deal in place, it wouldn't have been no question who would be hosting this. This would have been another joint for Top Rank. This would have been the perfect thing for Xander Zayas to have a fight during the Puerto Rican Day Parade weekend in June or whatever it is, right? Unification about June in Puerto Rican Day weekend, New York City, Madison Square Garden. That would have been set. It would have been easy work. I mean, it would have been easy work. Okay. But like I said, I mean, we don't know what's going on with Top Rank, if they have something in place or if they're working on something. But Matchroom got the zone on the, pretty much in their back pocket. So they can say, hey, look, we got the whole the zone thing or whatever it is, and hey, there you go. So who knows what's going to happen here in this sense, because outside of Xander Zayas like having that fight card in Puerto Rico, everything else has basically been for Top Rank involved fighters. They've been on other cards. So we'll have to see how it goes. You know what I mean? BVO Sports asks a few questions here. Why is David hiding from Jai Opetaia? Are you talking about who? David Benavidez? I don't know. I talked about David Benavidez earlier. I talked about Jai Opetaia earlier. David Benavidez has that upcoming bout in May in Las Vegas. Well, it's supposed to be in Las Vegas. We already got the whole thing with the Box Fan Expo. It says that they're going to be in Las Vegas for that particular weekend, May 2nd. So you're going to have David Benavidez there against Zurdo Ramirez, right? And now you got Jai Opetaia that's going to be fighting on March 8th on Zuffa Boxing. And I said it earlier, I'll say it again. Jai Opetaia is fighting Brandon Glanton. They're on Zuffa, right? It's supposed to be for a world title there for Zuffa. As of right now, Jai Opetaia is still standing as the IBF Cruiserweight Champion. They did release their rankings a couple of days ago. He's still there as the world champion. Is he going to stay as the IBF Cruiserweight Champion before this fight, after this fight, or whatever? And will he have to pay sanction fees to the IBF while having this fight against Jai Opetaia? We'll see how that goes there, man. And he said, yeah, David Benavidez said he will not stay at cruiserweight. He going back down to 175. Now the thing with David Benavidez, right? Yeah, because he was kind of saying that, and hopefully I could get something set up with him. Yeah, he's saying that he's saying going back down to 175. Here's the thing though with 175, right? We know that he's currently the WBC champion. We know who the champion is for all the other sanctioning bodies. That particular champion just recently, was out saying that they're, back in camp. Even though I have that fighter there, Bevo, in the Boxing Source pound for pound top 10, I'm not sold on him having a really high level fight for his next bout. I don't think he's going to have a rematch with Artur Beterbiev. I think he's going to have that fight against Michael Leifert. And I think that's been pretty much like what I've been saying since he had that back injury. That once he gets back 100%, he is not going to have a rematch with, Artur Beterbiev. He wasn't going to be fighting David Benavidez. So he is going to be ended up fighting Michael Leifert. If I'm right about that, that's going to be some crazy work. He says, Bivol looked huge. He needs to go to cruiser himself. Well, I mean, he did have an injury, he said, for some time. So we'll see how that goes on that, man. He said, well, Jai Opetaia was promised undisputed. Well, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen now, man. Good luck to him. Good luck to him. Because after he's there on Zuffa Boxing, how many fights did he have under Zuffa, probably about 2, 3, well, 3 probably this year, something. So we'll see how that goes. He said, "Oh, you better hope I don't get that interview, man. You better hope I don't." He said, like, Boots is still a prospect. Nah, man. Listen, that should be another thing, right? We got to get some motion on what's happening with Virgil Ortiz. I don't want to hear much about and I'm going to say this here, and I'm going to say this again, and it is what it is. I really don't want to hear from that manager or see any posts from that manager, man. I wanted to see if I could get that documentation about Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions, putting a lawsuit on Rick Maurizian. But I don't want to see no post from Rick Maurizian and anything like that, unless if it's actual fight that's going to be involving Virgil Ortiz Jr. You have Virgil Ortiz, kind of like Sue and Golden Boy Promotions. They went back and forth as far as like what they, claimed as far as like making a fight with Jerome Boutsenis. So I really don't want to, hear about all that. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that goes. And his 5 fights. And that last comment, like I said, Thursday, if you're gonna be talking about it, then I'm gonna bring it up, all right? But we got a couple of things that are up in the air for Jaron Ennis. Okay. So we'll see what happens here over the next couple of days, probably in a week or two. But as long as all of that lawsuit stuff is going on, I don't know, man. It says like Ortiz and Boots really want to make the fight happen. Wish they would build it more, but they can't with all the belts tied up. I mean, they don't really need the belts. They really don't. Like, they really don't. The thing is like, the zone wants to fight. They want the fight. But the zone will only pay for whatever they can pay for. Okay. You already have, like, and a lot of this stuff is like public record, right? You got what's going on with Boots and Matchroom, and what his deal is as far as like what he gets per fight. Pretty much has a minimum per fight. You already know what you get with Virgil Ortiz Jr. and his minimum per fight, right? So you're pretty much like starting at a base of around, at its very minimum, $5 million total. And you know that this particular fight ain't going to be no $5 million purse, nowhere close. Could it be double? Maybe. But one of the things in reference to that lawsuit between Virgil Ortiz Jr. and Golden Boy Promotions is one side basically stated that Virgil Ortiz Jr. and their party wanted upwards of $7 million for that particular fight against Boutsenis. Now, is it to where they could get $7 million, or do people think that Virgil Ortiz is worth $7 million for a fight against Boutsenis? A number of people say no. But again, it's all up to who's willing to put that money up. Okay. Now, I did mention here at the beginning of the show what Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez earned for their particular bout. Now, as far as like the numbers that came back, I haven't had anything confirmed on that yet. They did say a thing there with the sellout. It is what it is on that. But if they feel like this particular bout between Boots and Ortiz could like generate maybe more than 10 million, possibly. Vegas, yeah. But if not, then we ain't gonna get it, and we're gonna get we might get Boots somewhere else. Some people have said like Atlanta. We'll see. But I'm gonna, anything that I get, y'all know who I'm gonna pretty much like reference and as far as like that is concerned. So we'll see. But as of right now, until that whole thing is cleared between Golden Boy Promotions and Virgil Ortiz, yeah, we'll see. It says, where's Turkey when you need him? Uh, I don't know if he's involved in the what is it, the Netflix events. I don't think he is. But you got what's going on for February 21st. They may have something in place for maybe March or whatever, but we'll see. But I think one of those two guys is going to have a fight by April, regardless. I think one of those two guys are going to have a fight by April. You know, but it's something because you have what's going on in the 154-pound division, and this one right here is like the biggest fight that could be made in 154, and neither one of them have a full world title. It's almost like how last year you had David Benavidez versus David Morrell Jr. at 175, and Benavidez at the time was the interim champion for WBC, and David Morrell Jr. was the interim champ for the WBA. So you can have an interim champ versus an interim champ with Boots and Virgil Ortiz if they end up fighting next. But like I said, I mean, what's the percentage to me? It's like for me a 20% chance that fight happens next, at least for me right now. Because like I said, until they get that whole little litigation and lawsuits and court stuff all sorted out, then I can't really have full confidence that Virgil Ortiz is fully ready to have that fight take place without the involvement of Oscar La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions. And Rick Meridian could post like a whole bunch of AI stuff or whatever it is. Like, don't talk about that. Just talk about the fight getting made and have a date, have something set, and that's it. That's all. So that's what you got. All right. So for me, that's mainly what I have. Like I said, we got the Zuffa Boxing coming up on Sunday. Next week, we're gonna get more into those fights that are taking place on February 21st. We have a couple of interviews. Hopefully, we could set up a couple of more interviews here because we got a few fighters that we're going to be talking to that are going to be on that February 28th card in Arizona there with that Emmanuel Navarrete versus Sugar Nunez. So we're going to see about having a couple of fighters that are involved in that card. We're going to be talking with them here, so be on the lookout for that. All right. But we will be, back on with the Boxing Source podcast on its regularly scheduled time there, Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So that's what we got on slate. Big thanks for everyone that's been able to listen to the Midweek Report here live. That's what I got for y'all. Until next time, I'll catch y'all later. Peace out.